Okay, so hey Brett, so we decided to make this video and record this conversation in order to be able to help people with the topic of anxieties,
Mhm.
which is have always been there for everybody in some way, but now is compounded with everything that's going on in the world, with the virus and with the consequences in the economy and so on. And we just wanted to share, you and I agree, we just wanted to share a little bit of thoughts about anxieties, and maybe also talk through some points that helps people understand that better, and maybe also get a couple of ideas on how can I actually deal with it. You know, how do I combat the moment when it comes up and so on, so it doesn't paralyze me in the wrong moment, right? So Brad, let's maybe start about first into looking anxieties actually. First of all, maybe what is it? How would you define it? And then secondly, how did they even come up? How do they develop?
You know, the human person, the human being is designed to worry. We like things to be fixed and concrete. And when they're not, the body is designed to look around and say, what do we do? So if you're self-employed and your calendar isn't full for 6 months, you're designed to worry. If you're in an organization right now and the business starts to let people go because they can't sustain it, you're designed to worry. So as human beings, already we're predisposed to anxiety, to look for the things that are concrete and safe. And when things aren't safe, our job is to worry. So we actually have, like a part of our brain that's job is just to make sure we're safe. And I think that, you have experience of working in startups, you must see it there, right? Everybody's like driving, but what happens when you hit a stumbling block, right? You must see the anxiety there as well, right?
Yeah, well, that's right. But maybe it sounds to me a little bit like maybe safe is the key word here. So that is probably a very, how do you say, individual concept. So some things may feel safe for me, but they feel unsafe for you. How do we actually get to, categorize something as safe or not safe for me?
I think that's a really interesting question, right? The objectivity of what is safety. And on top of that, that idea of things need to stay the same in order for me to feel safe. There's another layer, right? So when things start to change, that safety moves as well. So to your first point, what is safe to you or safe to me? Well, safety comes from a deep psychological root of your upbringing, your parents, your culture, your society, your school, your education, and how you view what is safe, as in, do you find safety with others? Are you someone who finds safety on your own? Are you somebody who looks for adventure, like not to be safe? So the psychology of safety is something that is totally subjective, and it depends on the upbringing. It depends on the grounding we as individuals have within our own families, within our own schooling, and within our own societal function. When you think of safety, when you look at sort of movement of people, what do you observe when you think of the different types of people you know, and when you think of safety? What do you observe in them for those that feel more safe or those that feel less safe?
Yeah, that is also really an excellent question, because and also think it's important for us to discuss this, because it could be, some sort of pointer or guidance for people to actually then reflect, what is it for me? And why is it like that for me? Before I really answer your question, just wanted to add one thing in the same context. Based on the experience that I have talking with people, and from so far what I believe through life experience, I understand is that exactly that what you were saying is that over time we through our experiences, through upbringing and so on, we make experiences and we somehow categorize them. I don't think consciously, more subconsciously, about this is safe for me or that's not safe for me. So if you were, for example, brought up in an environment where there was, you know, how do you say, violence at home or something like that, maybe you learned for you it's safe not to be seen. Now, when you're an adult and you're no longer in that environment, that program continues to run. You know, unless you actually really discover that there's a program that's still running that tells you it's safer for me not to be seen, and then you will continue to behave like that. And it's probably also hard to change that. We can talk about that later, but I think this is something that I observe a lot. So as you speak with people and they let out a little bit on, okay, so this is my anxiety, and you ask, okay, so what do you remember of this? You know, when was the first time you felt like this? It always goes back, or almost always goes back to something that, you know, somehow in the past has, you know, happened. It doesn't even have to be something significant, but it kind of builds over time sometimes. And then all of a sudden you really have an anxiety that also really determines your behavior, and through your behavior and also the outcomes. That's what I'm seeing.
I think what you do there is you highlight how, as human beings, our brain has evolved over time to compartmentalize everything we experience into things that are safe for us and things that are not, which means that wherever I go, there's a part of my brain that's consciously checking the environment, searching, is this a threat? Is this a threat? And as soon as it sees a threat, and here's to your point, it could be a real threat or it could be completely imagined.
Exactly.
The response is the same.
But it's still real.
Yeah.
It's real.
Yeah, because the response mechanism then goes into an automatic drive to protect us.
Yes, exactly.
And that anxiety then drives through the body, flooding it. We call it a flood, in fact.
Yeah.
Floods the body. And this is when anxiety can take over and can, at best, be horrible to experience, and at worst, it can be totally paralyzing.
Yes, that's so true. And also, by the way, I think maybe is a good point to also add is because, you know, some anxieties may, from your perspective, seem imaginary, but for the person experiencing them, it's real. I think it's extremely important to not be judgmental about that with someone else.
This is
right? That doesn't help at all. Helps nobody.
And I don't think it matters whether you're sitting in a role right now where you still have a job, or whether you've not got a job right now, or whether you're sitting at home homeschooling your children while your partner tries to work in the other room with one computer. The subjectivity of safety and anxiety is what makes it such a challenge for all of us, actually. Maybe what we need is to elevate levels of compassion at this time when levels of anxiety and stress are so much higher because of the extra challenge of living in a pandemic.
Yes, I totally agree with you there. Just yesterday I had a conversation where I said to someone, I think in the situation that we're in right now, what is mandatory for us to do in our behaviors is to be actually extra gentle with everyone. I mean, not like a porcelain vase necessarily, but take it a tick slower, right? With others, judging them, putting pressure on them. If somebody having some sort of breakdown, the last thing he needs is actually some, I don't know, non-empathy, or, you know, just go do it and something like that. Hold on a minute, you know, see what the other person is really fighting against. You have no clue. You have no context, you know?
No, I think you're right, because the worst thing that we can do is to tell them not to worry. Don't be silly.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Right. I think this is where levels of empathy and compassion need to rise, like exponentially, compared to what they have been historically, where everybody's been driving for business. Actually, now we need to pause. I think you said before, just pause and step back a little bit and see what the other person maybe is experiencing. Maybe not trying to understand the feeling, but to understand the experience. why the anxiety has come up. What is that safety net for them?
Exactly. I mean, and that's actually a really good point. So let's say, I'm imagining this now, somebody tells me, a classic one, I'm afraid to speak up in public or speak on a stage. Now, even if I would know this, for me, I can't share that feeling because I don't have that. I don't share that anxiety. Now, if I am in any way care about that person, I just take that serious, that it is actually something that they're afraid about. And I'm trying to help, but not by saying, come on, just go do it. That actually probably makes things worse. I think it's important to acknowledge it and yeah, and help people figure out, okay, so what is it actually that is making you afraid of that? And it's probably a longer journey. I don't think you can heal that in a 5-minute conversation with someone.
No, I don't think you can hear that in a 2-day training program, right? Someone who's experienced running workshops on that topic,
Yeah, right.
can heal it. But I think if you look at the current environment, if we take your point there and we put it into today's world, then you have people who are anxious about, say, for example, losing their job.
Right.
And you might be a friend and you might be somebody who's completely secure in your role. Your role is a critical part to play in the business you're involved with. Or maybe you run your own company, so you're going to keep going anyway. So when your friend or colleague is saying, I'm worried about losing my job, there is little empathy. How do we take that time to not go, oh, don't worry, it will be fine, you'll get another job? No, actually, we need to be able to stop and try and understand what is the trigger. And maybe this is to your point of, like the first question you asked 10 minutes ago, which was, where does the anxiety come from? It's the trigger. So
Yes.
we understand the definitions of safety and anxiety, but what makes it so subjective for people, in my experience, is the trigger. What are the triggers that each of us have that push us to that edge of anxious?
Yes.
And I'm
What is it?
go on.
No, just but that's a good point. I think we need to be aware of what are our own triggers as a sort of quick fix. No, not fix. Sorry, that's the wrong word. But maybe as a first step, I think it's super important to understand what is it that actually triggers this feeling in us. Maybe let's remind ourselves that when you're feeling anxious, you have there are different signs for everybody, but it can be anything from feeling an actual physical tension to breaking out in the sweat or not being able to speak or whatever it is, or an inability to act. So triggers, what can you tell us about triggers?
I think triggers are symbols for people that symbolize moving away from safety. For example, you gave the example of a colleague at work who's nervous about presenting on stage. So a trigger would be me coming up and saying, hey, Frank, next Friday, can you do the presentation to the board? I'm going to be on holiday and I need you to cover for me. I'll send you the deck. You can play with it, but it's on you. There's your trigger.
Yeah.
Actually, it's not the getting up and presenting that's going to be a problem. You'll be fine. You'll get through it. It's the 1 week between now and next Friday when your triggers will push you to make you worry and therefore become totally unproductive. So triggers essentially are the mechanisms in our head, the stories that we tell ourselves that make us think something is true.
Yes, that's great.
Right? So I don't know if you've experienced this, but it's almost this ability we tell ourselves a story and we completely believe it. So I walk past an office and you're sitting in there with 2 of my colleagues chatting. And when I walk past, you guys start laughing. Now you're having a joke. You're telling some story about something that happened between the 3 of you, but it happens that I'm just walking past the window when you start laughing. Okay, you're a trigger for me because my safety anxiety comes from not feeling like I fit in. You weren't even laughing at me, right? But you've triggered in me a whole story in my head. Oh my God, Frank and the guys are talking about me. I'm no good. They don't respect me.
That's right. It's interesting. I mean, I don't want to go deeper into this subject. It's probably for another day. But this particular example that you were bringing up is also incredibly related to, you know, judgment and dealing with judgment from others. It's just particular example, which I think is also a fascinating one. But anyway, this is exactly, you know, how you described. These are the things that trigger us, and between now and the moment, we keep telling ourselves stories of worry and of negative outcomes and of problems that may come up. And the trouble is then they compound over time. So it's not just that in your, you know, example that maybe you're asking, are they laughing about me? Until you actually ever clarify that, maybe there's also other things. Maybe you did something strange, or your zipper was open, or you know, whatever it really is. So and you begin to really compound the anxieties, and in the end, you don't know what to do.
And I think this idea of telling us a story, maybe what we have to do is help people understand they don't have to believe the story they tell themselves.
Yeah.
Because the human mind can't hold two simultaneous thoughts. So we can't stop those thoughts coming in. So if a negative thought comes into your head, that's kind of normal in my opinion. The skill is how long I let it sit there for, right?
Exactly.
Do I listen to the story? Do I believe the story? And do I let it leave its damage and then fly away?
Exactly. And can it be that actually some of the methods, let's talk about that maybe in the next step, is that some of those methods to get past that point are actually built on the fact that you cannot deal with two thoughts at the same time. So the strategy is to actually start something else. You know, you do something else other than continuing to build your story of anxiety. Is that right?
Yeah, I think that is one functional way of dealing with it. Another is to lean into it, tell yourself the story, and then use a different technique to balance that thinking, to become more rational with that process. You know, what people don't often do, Frank, in my experiences, they never check if their story is true. So what about if we introduce, once I recognize the trigger, what about if following the trigger, I have like a fact check to see, is that story true? Where's the evidence for my story?
Yeah, that's true. Let's take maybe you can walk through an example. Maybe that's helpful for some people. Let's say my situation is I've just been laid off, part of this crisis and so on. So I'm beginning to worry because I'm afraid of a number of things. I'm afraid that maybe, you know, I don't know how to continue to pay my mortgage. Maybe I have responsibilities for others also, so I have financial worries. Then I will worry about, am I too old for somebody else to hire me? I look at the labor market and see all, you know, lots of other people are also being laid off. So I'm worrying and I'm not calm. What would you suggest is like the things that we should do maybe in a sequence for us to get past that moment and that anxiety in that moment?
Look, I think there's a couple of things here as well, and maybe we need to just qualify for a moment before we sort of step into how do we resolve. So
Okay.
there's part of me that wants to respond to your question. That depends on whether you want to resolve the worry or stop the anxiety from taking hold.
Fair point.
Example is we might be able to use a technique, a cognitive technique, a thinking, rational technique that questions and qualifies the story and the threat that you're feeling. But if you've already become anxious, maybe you have to work with the anxiety first. And that might be a breathing technique, a progressive muscle relaxation technique to come out of the anxiety before I can do the rational thinking and qualify, okay, actually, I don't have to believe the bad press. I'm telling myself right now that I'm going into a saturated labor market. I'm already hitting 50. No one's going to want me. And before 2 minutes have passed, I'm completely unemployable.
Forever. And yeah, that's a super fair point. Of course, in the moment where I actually feel the anxiety, I'm not in the position to think rationally about it. So getting out of that, feeling first is probably probably the first step. How does it work?
So I think there's three really cool approaches to do this. The first is what analysts and therapists call leaning in to the feeling. And what we mean here is, if you imagine my hand is straight, it's coming in and stepping back. So I have to let myself feel it. I recognize the trigger. I'm feeling a little bit worried. Actually, that's okay to feel worried. It is worrying times. I can't just ignore it and pretend it's not there. So when I talk about leaning in, what I'm really saying is you're leaning into the feeling. You're letting yourself feel it. You might cry. You might shout and scream. You might want to bash the table and, just look at the dog and go, we need to go for a walk. I'm looking down because the dog is sleeping down here on the floor next to me. But that leaning in to the feeling, first of all, acknowledges that it's not a great moment. And by acknowledging that, the next thing is what we call stepping back and then stepping out. So there's 3 steps. Lean in, step back, step out. And it's in this progressive way. We lean in to feel it. Then we just pause. We don't dive in. We don't start catastrophizing and thinking, this is it. I'm never going to work again. I'm going to lose my house because I won't be able to pay the mortgage. No, this is a really bad time. I'm feeling very anxious. I'm worried about what's going to happen. But I need to get myself together. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to step back and breathe. And then I'm going to step out of the situation, like physically moving back. And this is now putting me into within like 30 seconds of the anxious feeling, putting me in a position where I can maybe start to have some more sort of cognitive, thoughtful, positive, rational discussions with myself. So I lean in, I step back, I step out. 3 phases.
Yes.
This would normally, within a 90-second process, move people from anxiety, worry, to calm breathing, ready to think about it. 30 seconds in each state. Does that make sense when you're hearing it?
That's pretty fast, actually. Actually, to be honest, I was thinking that as you explained this point where you step back. What I like to combine it with is, you were saying focus on the breathing. I think the focus on the breathing part is incredibly important for loosening up the tension that has been building a little. But if you combine it with something that also relaxes the brain a little bit, combined to what we were saying earlier, you can only have this one thought at a time, is what I think works great is if you stop thinking the problem that you have right now or you perceive the real is the only thing that exists in your world. Because when you're afraid, this is the only thing that exists. So if you manage to, simple things, just kind of look out the window, just see how big the world is around you, see all the people down on the street. So you see there is more than just this problem, and if you combine that with the breathing and just have this view, whether you close your eyes and imagine it or whether you actually look out of window, I don't think matters so much. Whatever works for someone.
I love this idea because it's so mindful. And what I love about it is it puts us into perspective.
Yes.
And I think it sits beautifully in that second segment when you're stepping back, whether you're closing your eyes, looking out the window, listening to the birds or the sounds outside, is that mindful moment. Or maybe even to pick up on your point around breathing. Maybe it's like I like to do like a 12-second rotation of breathing, where I breathe in for 4 seconds, I hold my breath for 4 seconds, and then I breathe out for 4 seconds. And maybe I have to do that 2 or 3 times just to do, you know, the stepping out bit. So linking that stepping back with mindful breathing or mindful observation to offer some perspective gets you ready mentally to then do the thinking piece afterwards. It's that pausing moment that I think is so critical in putting some space between the worrying thought that's overtaken you and the rational thinking that can come later that maybe minimizes that anxiety. So maybe it's a hybrid of what you're saying there and the idea of leaning in and then stepping back.
Yeah, and I can do that. I mean, that's for me. I can do this at the same time. So when I step back, I can at the same time, you know, really relax from a physical perspective, maybe with the breathing technique. But I can at the same time also use my imagination and just force myself into thinking, not into thinking, into actually recognizing all the things that are around me, just make my universe a little bit bigger than the one thing that I was focused on. But I do think this is also the perspective part is a key word for this, you know, stepping away and maybe even finding a solution. Yeah. Right. So what I actually, how do you say, almost subscribe, you know, prescribe is that you need to get this awareness about that what you're dealing with right now is maybe just a moment in time. It's a moment of your life. It's an aspect, a temporary one, maybe even of your life. Some people are dealing with big problems, right? So let's say this example we were saying, somebody just been laid off. What now? Represents a problem. You need to find a solution, right? You can't just, you know, think it away or breathe it away, but you need to find a solution eventually. But in order for you to be able to do that, your brain to find one, you need to get to some sort of, you know, higher vantage point. Looking at your situation from a higher vantage point, you know, realizing that perhaps it is a problem now, but it will probably be solved. I'll find a way to solve that in the next day or week or 3 months or whatever. That just saying this is still just a tiny part of my life, and it's not necessarily the end or, you know, something catastrophic that I'm afraid of. You know, I think this trying to find this much broader perspective is a really solid base for you to eventually find a solution. Have the calm to look at the facts and so on and so forth. What do you think?
And I think what I like about that is it, for me anyway, it qualifies what in psychotherapy we talk about in calming the amygdala down. And the amygdala is our fight or fight mechanism, right? Yeah. So when the flight or fight mechanism kicks into gear, we become far more tense. And in therapeutic practice, what we do is we ask 3 questions in fight or flight. What am I thinking? What am I feeling? What do I want to happen right now? And it's those 3 questions that separate the feeling from the thoughts, from the action. What am I thinking? What am I feeling? What do I want to happen? And it's that idea of thoughts, feelings, and action that you've just described beautifully, by the way, in having that sort of perspective, the higher vantage point, and being able to sort of take that step back. And maybe it is just, you know, Frank, I think for some of us, it is about allowing us to have that horrible feeling that is completely overwhelming. That says, I could lose everything.
Yeah.
Even though you probably won't, in that moment, we need to be able to feel that, to come back from that point. Because if you walk through, what am I thinking? What am I thinking is I'm thinking I might not work again. I'm thinking this could be the end. I could lose my house. What am I feeling? Actually, I'm feeling down. I'm feeling alone. I'm feeling worried and scared. I'm feeling unsupported by my business or my colleagues or my friends. They're quite different things, the thinking and the feeling. What do I want to happen now? You know, in 20 years of therapy, when I've asked that question, most people want to stop feeling the way they're feeling.
Interesting.
So it's a real positive question. What do I want to happen now? I want to stop feeling like this. Well, we all have that control. So if we can say out loud, I don't want to feel like that. So we can acknowledge the feeling, but acknowledge the desire to move away from it. You're moving to that vantage point that you're talking about, that higher point that offers some perspective, allows you to be more mindful. And I think sometimes the simplicity of a question, even asking ourselves the question, can really offer benefits beyond a book or training program. It's a simple question. What do I want to happen?
I agree. This is a really powerful one. In just really separating these three things from one another, and probably if you do it a couple of times, maybe this is also something you can do very, very fast. You don't have to suffer for days or something like that through that moment. Maybe it's something you can begin to move away from relatively quickly with this technique or thought process.
In principle, 4 to 21 times, this will become an immediate reactive habit. It's a cognitive approach. So it doesn't require lots and lots of practice. For some people, if they did it 4 times already, it will be their natural response. For some, it will take longer, 5, 6, 7, maybe even up to 20 times. But within 4 to 20 times, it will become a natural response mechanism.
And that's absolutely true. It really something. It's almost like a muscle you train, but you don't need a whole lot of training.
Correct.
You just do it a couple of times, and all of a sudden you find yourself be very fast in accepting a new situation that doesn't feel good, and be able to really make smarter choices from there on, and also move out of that position faster. Doesn't mean you have actually in principle combated a long existing anxiety, but you have actually started a journey on finding a solution to what's bothering you or what you're afraid of for the moment.
I think this is, again, in therapeutic terms, everybody has their own map of the world. And in psychology, we call them distortions.
Mm-hmm.
And depending on your distortion will depend on your worry, right? Your level of anxiety. What we don't want is for people to catastrophize. We don't want them to get sucked in to the worry and stay there. And I think even in this sort of first 20, 25 minutes of us talking, this is about acknowledging the feeling is there, but not diving in to it. And I think this is really important. We have to acknowledge, and then we have to move forward with it. We can't dive in and start, spiraling into a worry, because once that takes hold, I believe anxiety becomes much more challenging to control then.
That's true. So, the example that we've been using most of the time now with the scenario of someone losing a job and what now, that's a, pretty, how do you say, it happens pretty often nowadays. But I'm also very, very empathetic for anxieties that people have that are triggered way more often than a job loss. So, and it could be anything. It could be, I don't know, a social anxiety, and you'd love to have some social contact, but you're afraid to add a party to, speak to someone or ask the girl you have a crush with out, or whatever it really is, because that happens all the time. So with those, I'm also curious about how can you actually finally resolve anxieties like this so they don't even come up anymore. So the triggers that happen in the future they just don't do anything anymore for you.
I sense that most of us will have triggers always. It's the speed at which we move away from them. So there's nothing wrong psychologically in having a trigger. The challenge for all of us is to not get caught out by them. So as soon as it happens, I know it, I feel it, and then I move through my process, my approach to dealing with it. So whether it's about social connections, although in today's climate, we're socially distanced to the point where actually I think anxieties are coming just from people almost being suspicious of people around, you know, and talking about, are you 2 meters apart from me, and being able to just speak up, be assertive in those moments. So when you give your example there, for me, that anxiety is, how do we make sure we can always say something in the moment? Whether it's to someone we like, whether it's in a business call, whether it's in the village shop when we're socially isolating and distancing from people. Actually, how do I make sure that what's on my mind comes out of my mouth? So I don't leave a situation wishing I'd have said more or wishing I'd have said less. And this for me is the technique around how do we control those levels of assertiveness. And part of that is, you know, techniques and styles, approaches to how we communicate. So learning how to express what I'm thinking and what I'm feeling. Hey, Frank, I really want to say this to you. I trust that's okay. And learning how to say what I'm thinking and what I'm feeling. And being able to accept your answer with, hey, Brad, that's not going to happen. Thanks for asking, though. Very nice of you.
Yeah.
And for me not to think this is the end of the world. And that to be another trigger, because I also have a trigger of rejection, as well as a trigger of lack of assertiveness. So not only did I get over my fear by asking you the question, you've now rejected me, so that gives me another trigger. So I think there's, you know, part of this is about recognizing different ways of turning the volume up or down, or how I communicate. And this is more of a challenge, I think.
Yeah, I think so. I agree. The thing is, would you agree with the thesis, so to speak, that a way of training yourself not to actually feel anxious in certain moments anymore, or at least, you know, reduce it to a level that is really not affecting you, is, if you can, is, you know, slowly train it, slowly in small steps, maybe expose yourself to similar situations, just do small steps, and then just over time you will have lots of memory about things that you did and it never went wrong, so maybe you're there a little bit more. Do you think that's the way?
I think that's definitely one way, if you can find those little mini opportunities to test it. Actually, I think there's a way we can just practice on our own. When we're in the shower, when we're driving in the car, when we're going for a walk or a run. Actually, getting used to saying things out loud is the biggest challenge for people. And actually, if I get used to hearing myself say these things, then when I find myself in the situation, I'm not nervous about saying it because I've said it 150 times, all right, on my own. But now I'm in that situation, I'm used to hearing myself. I know how the words will come out.
I love that.
Right? So it's not, I think, yes, it would be great if I had 20 opportunities to practice asking somebody to come for a drink with me, or asking someone if there was maybe a job opportunity going in their company. But why not just practice? This is what I do anyway. I practice on my own.
I love that. I think this is super smart. It's 100% risk-free for you as the person who may be anxious about something like that. And you actually you train your brain, your nervous system, to just believe this is a completely normal situation. I do it all the time.
Correct.
Plus, actually, through the practice, maybe you also fine-tune your style.
Correct, because you're playing with the words and you hear yourself say it, What
Yeah.
I don't want to happen is for the first time I hear myself say it is the moment when I need it to work.
Yeah.
It comes
Exactly.
out and I'm so conscious of how it sounds, I can't focus on the words. But if I practiced it, so when I finally ask you, hey, Frank, is there an opportunity for us to do some work together? Actually, I've said that 36 times already. The 37th time is a hybrid of version 4 and version 11. And I'm not worried about which version is coming out. I'm just able to say it because I've practiced it so many times. My mouth, my brain is used to saying it. I can focus on how I say it, not what I say. And that
Yes.
makes it far less anxious in the moment. So yeah, I'm a big, big promoter of practicing these things on my own, to my phone, in the mirror, in the shower, in the car. So many opportunities to just keep trying and seeing, oh, how does that sound? Oh no, let's try that again.
That's true. I love this. It's a wonderful advice because it's so easy to practice, so easy to put into practice. I mean, um, that's really good. And also, I must say, so then, if you have been the one that has been practicing something that you would want from me, for example, and you wouldn't, were afraid to express that to begin with, if you practice it your 36 times, the moment then you say this to me as the recipient of the message, I will see zero insecurity in you. This will just be a 100% natural thing that I'm observing.
Right.
And so, which I think in return will also give you a really good feeling and an increased sense of safety for anything that follows after that.
You
Because
know,
my reaction will just be like, I'm going to take you serious.
Frank, I think the whole point here is it's a bit like, let's say you and I wanted to run the New York Marathon in November. So today we go out for a run, we run 5K. It's a nice run, it's a nice day outside, we do it maybe in 25, 30 minutes. Doesn't mean we're ready to run the marathon in November. We have to work on our sleep, on our diet, build up our fitness, our stamina, move from 5 to 10K, from 10K to 20K, do some races to get a little bit more ready. And maybe in November, we can do the New York Marathon in 3 hours, be very pleased with it, raise some money for charity. But we would have had to train ourselves long before that race day to be ready mentally and physically for that race. We can't do it because we had one really nice 5-kilometer run back in April.
Yeah,
And I
so
think
true.
it's the same with what we're talking about here. There's nothing wrong in having the anxiety on these things. So let's spend some time practicing. Let's spend some time reworking our diet, learning how to say it, practicing it in a really safe environment. And then when the time comes, we'll be ready because we practiced when there was no stress.
Yeah, I love this. This is quite perfect, I must say. This is the way it can work, and combined with your suggestion in, saying things out loud that you can do in whatever private moment you have. This is incredible practical, I believe. I mean, this was about, communication or talking to someone where a lot of people have anxieties about, which is, I'm I'm so sorry about it, because then very often that also really limits their ability to achieve whatever they wish as their dream or their career or something like that. I'm mentioning this now because also in the context of job insecurities and layoffs, out of a sudden a lot of people will begin to have communication and conversation
Yeah.
with new people that don't know them as they maybe apply for a new job or something like that, and they may have not practiced that in decades, some of them. So, and really just trying to also say these things out loud, practice, how do I sound, what am I actually saying, how do I look like, what's my body language when I say that in front of a mirror, and so on. I think doing that a couple of times, I don't actually think you need to practice this for months. You need to just do this a couple of times,
It's
right?
normally within 4 or 5 times of saying something, you find the right words. There's a lovely quote from William Shakespeare, the English playwright, We must all learn, he said, to speak comfortable words.
Right.
So we must all learn our comfortable words. 4
Yeah.
or 5 times of saying a sentence, you probably have found a comfortable way of saying it.
Yeah, that's right. That's interesting. Actually, let me tell you something. So sometimes in moments of my life where I wanted to, there was a moment that was important for me where I wanted to say something, and I knew that moment was coming. I was trying to, in preparation of that, trying to find the right way to express that.
Mm.
Now, sometimes I found whatever words in my head or something that I kind of had prepared for that sounded great before the moment were terrible in the moment.
Right.
Not because they were the wrong words or the wrong expressions, but they were not me. And that's why, with regards to what you said earlier, it has to be your comfortable words. They're not necessarily ones that the professor that you admire that is expressing himself super eloquently in a particular style. It's not yours, maybe,
Really important. This is a really interesting and valid point, even from a therapy point of view. This is really critical. You must find your own path. It's not how your manager says it. It's not how your old teacher says it. Your own guru. You must find your version of it. And this is really important for some people who like to write things down. Because even when we write different to how we speak.
Oh, yes.
So you could write down what you want to say, and then when you say it out loud, it sounds completely wrong.
Yes. I have to laugh because I have memories from myself with exactly that exercise where I was just writing something. This is what I'm going to say when I'm presenting.
Right.
And then when I tried it, I went like, oh my God, this is so bad. It's great when you read it.
But it doesn't make sense when you say it out loud. This quote really resonates for me because it reminds me that actually with practice, and again, I think of my sister, for example, is a pianist.
Mm-hmm.
And when she plays a piece in a concert, it's exemplary. But the practice that went in, the hours of practice before the concert, is what makes her able to play it without music, without one wrong note. But it's her interpretation of the music.
Right.
And this is what I think we have to do with our words. We have to interpret our words. We can write it. It's a good start. So maybe for some people, when you're wanting to, make that pitch to somebody for a job, plan what you're going to say when someone says, hey, why is this important to you? Actually, making notes is a really great start. But it's just a start. You still have to interpret them and make them sound as though they would come from your mouth so that it resonates and lands with somebody else in a way that doesn't make you look anxious or insecure or unprofessional or nervous or worried or all these other triggers that we've been kind of touching on today in our conversation.
So, what do you think? Should we maybe summarize a little bit? Let's say, because we've been discussing so many things, so maybe it's a little bit hard to remember them. For anyone who will be watching this in its entirety, if I would ask you, I don't know, make a bullet list of, sequential things that you could do or should be doing to actually go from the moment of anxiety to getting past it. What is it?
Yeah, I think the first thing is we must lean into it. So let's, as a starting point, let's not be frightened of the anxiety. Yeah, let's embrace it. So step 1, embrace the anxiety. Feel it, experience it, but don't collapse into it. Step 2, learn to then step away from it. So this is when we step back and step out. So step 2 is all about breathing, being mindful, getting to a vantage point that offers some context, some perspective. Could be breathing exercises. You reference some really lovely mindful exercises where you just step away, you close your eyes, you imagine, you look outside for a moment. Step one, we experience it. Step two, we gain perspective. And step three, we start to think about different ways we could say it or approach it or present it, which allows us to come across as not anxious, not worried, or not insecure. So I think in threes, Frank, always in threes.
Most memorable. It's easy to remember.
Yeah, so step one, experience it, lean in. Step two, take the perspective. Step three, look to overcome it, whether that's through words, through writing, or through some assertive statement that you practice. And I think these three steps enable us to overcome the anxiety in a processed approach that in each of the three steps gives you a way out of not collapsing into the anxiety, which leads into worry, which just leaks energy. I don't know, does those three steps resonate for you? Do you feel maybe there's a fourth step, or can we keep it to the three?
Oh yes, for dealing with an anxiety as it comes up in the moment, I think that's it. There's maybe something, maybe we can explore that another time. Is actually, I actually mentioned that also earlier a little bit. What can we do so that maybe we're not gonna have this particular anxiety in the future anymore? So what's the journey with that? Because I'm sure there's also a way. I guess it's probably a little bit more complex and probably also very individual. But really, I think if, as you say, people, when you ask them, what do you want to happen right now? You don't want to feel like that right now, but actually, maybe you don't want to feel like that ever again. So maybe there's also ways for that. But for really, beating the anxiety of the moment, those three steps, I think they're great and they're very practical because they can, with a little bit of exercise, as we said, a little bit of training, you can do them in your 90 seconds, which is a really short amount of time. And in the context of the, anxiety is what you actually most of the time feel before the moment, as it builds up the worry that builds up before the moment. And later on, often you discover, oh, that wasn't that bad as I imagined it. But for this time, if you have a recipe that works in 90 seconds or up to 90 seconds, I think that's very useful. I think there's a ton of value for people who've been watching this, I hope.
And Frank, there's maybe one last thing we could share with people who are watching this. If they're really worried and stressful and all of these ideas, they still sound a little out of reach for people, the simplest way I could really say that I've seen help people who are super anxious, with debilitating worry, is if we can learn to smile and talk at the same time. The facial muscle movement of a smile relaxes that part of the brain that is designed to worry for us. It knows that when I'm smiling, I'm not stressed, because
Right.
I can't be stressed and under pressure if I'm smiling. That facial muscle movement. So if we can offer one thing which is just practical and physical without words, if people are feeling that worry and that stress and that pressure, if they can just close their eyes, put their chin in their neck, and just smile, normally within a minute and a half, again, within that 90 seconds, that part of the brain that's starting to worry is being told, hey, you're okay. That smile's telling you everything is cool. And maybe that's like a reserve for people who don't like the three steps. They just want one step. Maybe the smile is a great way. You and I are both smilers. We spent the last 60 minutes smiling at each other while we're talking about a topic like worry, right?
Yes.
Maybe for other people, it could be a really useful technique to train their brains to smile to combat the worry. Then the other steps, maybe the three steps, help them afterwards. I don't know, I've seen it in therapy for the last 20 years. It can really help people control themselves. And maybe it's something we can explore a little bit more next time. But maybe sharing it at the end of this conversation, because it's just in case the 3 steps are too much for people. I don't know what your experience.
Yes, I love this. I love this last advice. Let's just let it stand like that. With really that finishing comment from me is, maybe for some people that sounds like a ridiculous thing, like it can't be true, but it actually works. So, and I'll just leave it at that.
I love it.
Yes. All right.